You're back in the Gunners Club. You're here with Gunner, of course, with Seuss, and our glasses are charged. I'm drinking a Sam Houston bourbon, and yourself, Seuss?
Me? What was it again? It'll come to me.
Southern Comfort.
That's the one, Southern Comfort. Old school, mate.
Very old school. Very ladylike, too.
Yeah, well, I've shaved my legs for the occasion.
And I understand this weekend you've just changed your toilet seat. Well, you'd need that for sitting down and all.
Oh, that's harsh, but you're right, I did.
Now, if that's too blue for you, you might want to censor it, because today's topic is censorship in social media. And, Seuss, congratulations, you've just been hit with your first restricted content.
Yes.
Plus.
Yes, that's right.
Tell me about that.
Well, I will, but to set the table here for what we're doing, this is another episode of Does This Pass the Pub Test? In other words, is it right? Is it fair? Does it just smell fishy to you? That's right. We did a video just recently on, again, does it pass the pub test, about do the facts stack up, that's right, do the facts stack up with the Twin Towers? So we weren't claiming anything, we were stating opinions purely on what we know from the news, what's been transmitted across the world endlessly soon after the event. But YouTube decided that any images of the towers, that was on the video, of the towers themselves, right after the planes hit them, and they're on fire and the smoke coming out and all that type of stuff, that those images could trigger young people.
Now, I remember I was in that very building a week before that incident. I was in New York and actually in that building. And I remember coming back and the supermarket shelves were full of magazines and newspapers with almost identical pictures to what has been slapped with an 18 restriction now. This was for public consumption. This was everywhere. This was all that people were talking about.
Yeah, and it was like it was on a loop. It was constantly on the television. So for everyone to see. But now, how many years since?
Well, that's right.
And now all of a sudden it could trigger young people. Really?
Well, I guess what censor goes in fashion and out of fashion. I know, for example, in America, things such as violence are something which you really don't have a lot of censorship on at all. But when it comes to any hint of nudity or actual sexual congress, it's something which is very firmly restricted in America. Australia's a little bit different to that. I think we're a little bit less prudish in both ways.
Yeah, we are. But, I'm trying to figure out who it is that they're trying to suck up to.
It's very interesting because in gaming, so things like your Xbox, your PlayStation, your Nintendo, etc., there was great controversy about getting certain games released into Australia and making sure that we had the unedited versions of it. So a lot of what was available freely in America and not rated R, not some sort of notion of restriction at all, was not even available in Australia, even with restricted code, because effectively we didn't have a restricted code for it. It took quite some time for them actually to legislate and have an R rating for computer games in Australia, and then it meant we could start to get some of the games which they had available in America. It still didn't mean that we got all of the games, and it still didn't mean that we got all of the games unmodified into Australia, because there's still some topics in Australia which are taboo. And it's sort of funny how every country's got its quirks. But it seems that Australia now has got another taskmaster. It's not just the Australian government as a taskmaster, but it's also social media.
Yeah.
Because effectively the space which we're playing in now, we basically waded into the shallow end of a pool. We go into the deep end. It's full of all of the social media and all of the world as well. And there's another level of control on what we transmit and what we talk about.
But they're not publishers. So
that's a very interesting thing, is it? Who actually is a publisher? Are you the publisher yourself when you sit down and you say, this
No.
is a video, the video's done, and you put it online?
A newspaper is a publisher.
Okay.
In as much as they investigate the story, they check out the veracity of it, they make sure that the content is correct, and whereas the social media companies, and there's a range of them, they purely publish content. They're not responsible by law. They are not responsible for the content. They are simply a platform for you to disseminate your creations, if you like.
So some publishers like the New Yorker, who I used to subscribe to, were famous for fact-checking. So if you read an article and it was going to be published that week, and it was about a building, they would actually send someone up the street to make sure the building is still standing before it was actually published. That's how rigorous they were. I agree with what you're saying, that if we release something on Censorship, we're standing by it as our opinion, at least. And we sort of grow our own mark and our own goodwill from the content, what we do, and our consistency of what we do. And that's what we hang our hat on. And people like YouTube, those platforms, they're not hanging their reputation upon us. But what they're effectively doing is saying, you can use this particular image, or you can't use that particular image. You can use these certain words within, how many seconds is it? Within a video we can start to actually use expletives.
We can't swear on YouTube within the first 7 seconds of a video. However, after that, we can let rip if we want.
You'll note that's something which I really don't do, but when the camera's off, it's a bit like a blue cheese, isn't it? I just go right off.
Well, I do have a sign up there.
Wanting F-bombs dropping.
Exactly. And periodically they do. But in any event, why is that of a concern to Facebook or YouTube or, for that matter, any of the others? It's not them producing this stuff. It's us. They are purely a platform for us to put our content on.
I guess it's trying to step that fine line, isn't it, between freedom of speech and also not inciting people or inciting people with vitriolic ideas. And I guess the idea of something like showing the Twin Towers is something which can bring a real negative gut response. It's something which unfortunately could also be, I guess, a call to arms to people in another mind space as well.
I would understand that if it's a live... Let's say we're in the middle of a war zone and we're filming a live shooting or a, heaven forbid, a live beheading, as has been published before. I can understand that would perhaps create that response you're talking about. We're talking here, in my particular case, in the video that we're talking about here, is historic images that have been seen by literally billions of people around the world many times already.
Yeah, I guess it makes me think, what happens then to the use of war footage? So things from the camps that were liberated, for example, is it not something that could be shown?
Well, as it turns out, those videos are also monetarily restricted.
I mean, that to me is actually quite a shock, because I think that really proves your point more than anything else.
Yeah, because
it's not
like
something
that.
which I take lightly, because we've got shared family experience. But when you start to take away the objects of fact, that's actually when it becomes very, very dangerous. Frankly, I'm shocked. My jaw is pretty much dropped that you've just said that.
Yep.
I've used that basically as an example of something historically accurate, something which has happened, and something which still today needs to be commented upon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's akin to what has, in not too distant past, been happening in America, where they're pulling down statues of historic figures.
Yeah, so is
Really?
that rewriting history as if to show that then history is corrected by rewriting it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
it doesn't
that's
seem to wash for
very dystopian. That is very 1984 to me.
Yeah, 1984 went one step further than that. I guess I'm one of the sole people who actually spent more time reading the glossary of 1984 than actually reading the book itself, because it was all about curbing the way people could talk by changing the language that they used. So if you had any political idea, it was nonsensical. And effectively, politics is a bit like this. There's lots of syllables, there's lots of words. People aren't sure what the words mean today because we have to be careful to use particular words and not to use others. And also some words have got such emotion and baggage and cultural attachment to them that they don't mean the same thing to the person saying them as a person who hears them.
Yep.
Which is a reason why using video is so important. Because words are just symbols, and to some extent something visual is a symbol as well. But it's a lot more stark and it has a lot less baggage attached to it for the veracity of what it is a person's saying.
Well, a picture paints 1,000 words.
Isn't
that what they say? I have no idea. I'd like to say it was me.
Well, usually when they quote somebody, it's Wilbur Wilde. It's turned out Wilbur Wilde actually didn't write most of those things, but it still sounds very good.
Anyway, it just defies common sense that something of historical significance like that is now, for all intents and purposes, censored.
Well, it is. I mean, by basically restricting the people who can consume it, it effectively is.
Yeah.
And if you're restricting history, then what objective is there for truth?
It really smells fishy to me, and it smells politically motivated in my eye.
The great problem is, I think the people who are editing and modifying things on social media, and I read the notice that you got, they said that they use a combination of AI together with human observers as well.
Yep.
I think there's something which has basically been written. They look at what that image is and basically they decide, well, we just apply the blanket rule.
Yep, that's right. Look, I'm prepared to forego any monetary income on that rather than editing the footage on that video. Although the video was made in a light-hearted way, as we're trying to make here, although this is actually a bit more serious, because it is a pub test, we're having a drink where all we're doing is stating opinion. This is how we see it. It doesn't necessarily make it a fact. But when they censor factual images like that,
Which were in the public domain.
for how long?
Yeah,
on
literally
a
decades.
loop.
Literally decades.
On a loop. And now, all of a sudden now, it could trigger someone. Really?
I just hate to think that eventually is it going to be that when someone goes to a public library that there's going to be restricted sections in history as to what you've actually got access to or not?
Or those pages torn out, perhaps.
Well, this is very similar to, and it's not actually really that funny. I used to live in Germany, and this is exactly what they did in Eastern Germany. You'd go to borrow something, for example, a record, and they'd have that track would be scratched out. That one's not for public consumption. And the same, I guess, in the 30s with Die Bücherverbrennung, when they burnt all of the books of things which the state decided were subversive, and they weren't for public consumption. But we're not even talking about subversive ideas here. And in fact, we're not even charging with saying a call to arms for someone to do something, because that's absolutely against the way that we think and who we are. We're simply showing a historical context for something. And that for me is really worrying.
That's right. I cannot believe that that video was restricted when I'm lost for words. I really am. Seriously.
Yeah, I think the freedom that we've got in the West is something that we don't appreciate enough, and we don't understand, again, that it goes back to the classical understanding of history and then the reasoning which comes from an understanding of history. If we start to take that first thing away, it really is becoming very dystopian. It's becoming very 1984. If you make it impossible for someone to articulate a thought and you take away the reason for that thought, it's really the thin end of the wedge.
Oh, look, they haven't threatened to take down the video. They haven't restricted the channel. They've just simply restricted the access of us earning money off that channel due to those images being on there. However, if I were to remove those images, they would restore the income possibility on it.
Yeah, I mean, look out one day for going into a bookshop and there will be a restricted section.
It's,
you know, an area only for the Politburo to be able to access for the books
that's
to read.
it. Yeah.
I mean, really, this is the way that things start.
It really is fishy. I don't think it passes a pub test. If we're trying to incite someone or trying to get a reaction from someone, I would say, okay, possibly, depending on the content. This is historical images. I don't get it.
Yeah.
It's fishy.
I am a little bit shocked what you said regarding some of the other images that you wouldn't be able to even discuss.
Oh, no, you can discuss them. You just can't earn anything off them.
Yeah.
So it's the same as like for example, what you brought up, the liberation of Auschwitz or something like that. Yeah, you can put it up as a historical narrative if you want.
Yeah.
But no, you can't earn anything off that because, yeah, it's restricted.
Yeah,
and-
so it's restricting people from actually producing that sort of content.
Yeah, because
the
why
ideas
would they
become
want to
restricted.
continue
So
producing
the
it?
ideas become restricted and the audience becomes restricted.
Yep.
Very somber note. Sorry to leave you on that one. I'm a little bit shocked by that.
So am I, but I'm not changing the video. If you got other ideas on subject matter for the pup test, let us know, because we're going to continue making them. Good on you guys. Catch you on the next one.